Namaste. Welcome to Infinity Foundation. Hello, Deepthi. We are so glad to have you back with us.
Namaste, Divya. Really happy to be back here again.
Yeah. So for the first time viewers, Deepthi Rao is an Indian American software professional in the Silicon Valley, and she's also part of the LGBTQ community. So Deepthi, tell us a little bit about your journey as part of the LGBTQ community, and you have also studied and worked both in India and the US. So could you also share some experiences from that perspective?
Sure. So I was born and raised in India. I did my engineering here, and I worked about 5 years in India as well in the software industry. So all the time I knew that I was a little different, but of course, this was back in the early 2000s where conversations about, being gay or lesbian was not so mainstream. So my only reference growing up in India was like movies like Fire or, Dostana, where it was always hush hush. It wasn't like mentioned openly and almost like a derogatory mention of, being gay or lesbian. So I did not, I was hoping that it was a phase and it would pass. And then I moved to the US and started working there. And even then I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, which is fairly conservative city and state. And even there, I didn't think too much of it. It wasn't so mainstream. I think it wasn't until 2015 when gay marriage became legal in the US that the conversation became fully mainstream. Like by then I'd moved to the West Coast in Seattle, and I was working for a really large tech company. And there we had a group for LGBTQ employees, and the company sponsored pride parades, and I was literally like so surprised because even in my previous role in Atlanta, I'd never like told anyone at work that I was gay or anything because it didn't seem to matter. It was really a part of my identity that wasn't relevant to the work I did. However, in contrast, after I moved to the West Coast, it became very much a part of my whole persona. And I think there was a little bit of corporate diversity movements that added to it, right? Like it had become so mainstream by 2015 that being gay was almost like a cool thing. And so I was kind of pleasantly surprised with that. And I did try to make the most of it. And then I moved to the Bay Area where again, I think there were more gay people than straight people, just kidding. But it was quite prevalent. Like I found a large community of Indian gay and lesbian and people of the LGBTQ community. So it was really nice. It felt like I'd finally found my tribe. Conversations and at work were also mainstream. I actually started a product advocacy group at work for the LGBTQ group because I work at Facebook, and then our products are used by billions of people. So our group focused on how could we make Facebook products more equal for members of the LGBTQ community. So we came up with a lot of product enhancements that allowed people to come out on their Facebook profiles and specify their gender and things like that. So yeah, it was quite a bit of a contrast, even from the time I was in Atlanta in the early 2010s to what it is now. So now LGBTQ movement is of course like fully mainstream. There have been a few more letters that have been added. It's now LGBTQIA+. The last time I checked. So yeah, so it's definitely come a long way from where it was a few years ago.
Right. So what I gather is that you were pleasantly surprised in the sense you were happy to find a community where you could, share your identity and be comfortable and not, feel inferior or anything.
Right, exactly.
So I was reading your quote in our latest book, Snakes in the Ganga, and you have shared a little bit of this journey of yours there as well. And then what intrigued me is the quote where you said, I would like to quote you, I felt caught between two bad options. To have emotional and political support for being a lesbian, I must serve as a loyal member of the American LGBTQ plus community. So I could gather that something went wrong there. Like when you found your comfort and safe place. So could you elaborate more on that?
Sure, yeah. So once I moved to the Bay Area, it was literally like paradise because I'd found my tribe. I had all these friends that were from the community. Some of them were Indians of Indian origin. Many of them were either people that grew up elsewhere in the world, but were of Indian origin. So it was really nice to be with people that looked like me. They were like all brown Asians, and then they all identified similarly, right? So it was all great, and then slowly I started realizing that the group had very different views than me about India and Hinduism. So they always kept referring to Hinduism as a casteist, oppressive religion, and of course Modi and the Indian government as fascist. All the usual terms that you hear in the New York Times. And
sorry to interrupt you here, but how is that relevant to your cause as a community or your movement?
It wasn't that, and which is what was initially. I didn't think too much of it. Like I didn't think it was a big deal. Okay, we can have differing political views. We can have different views about our own religion, and that is totally okay, right? So I never thought of it as a big deal. And that didn't influence my friendship with them. However, I realized that that's not the case with people that think that are on the other side, right? Like, unfortunately, now I have to say people on the other side. I never thought that we were on different sides. So what happened was, I think this was early 2019s or late 2019. This group of friends was, again, they were very vocal about their hatred towards Hinduism. They were up, and some of them were like from, as they call it, oppressive upper caste Brahmin communities, but they were the first to kind of be fully apologetic and quickly shun it. I didn't really think about it too much. A few times I had a discussion. I wanted to have discussions about how it's not all black and white. Of course, there have been cases where maybe Brahmins or the upper castes misuse their power in the past, but that it's not the same right now. And caste is almost not a topic of discussion, at least not in the US, right? Like I never told what my caste was in the US. So, but every time I tried to bring up these conversations and provide a point of view that was a little bit different from what they had, I was always met with either opposition or silence or indifference. So anyway, I just left it thinking, okay, it's fine. We don't have to agree on everything. We're still friends. We're still part of the same larger community. However, they became very vocal towards the time when all these farmers' protests and CAA protests were going on. So they went on social media saying that Muslims and other communities were losing their citizenship, and they were like nonstop. They used to post continuously on their profiles, and after a few weeks, I saw that it was not really true, and so I felt like I had to make a comment. So I made a post explaining what CAA really was and how it was being misinterpreted, and almost they were just fanning the flames and spreading fear amongst the Muslim community. And that was the time when, as soon as I made this post, all these friends of mine quickly ganged up against me, and they started responding very viciously to the post itself. I know now in retrospect, it seems a little silly, like it wasn't really something that affected either of us, but I felt it was my duty as an Indian citizen to at least clarify what was going on in India, right?
And you're entitled to your opinion on the matter.
Exactly, yeah. Just like I did not go and yell at them for making these posts, I was entitled to provide not just my point of view, clarification on what exactly it was. But so after I made that post, I realized that this whole gang of people had basically cancelled me out, and then so that's when I realized that yes, there is a lot of anti-Hindu, anti-India sentiments in this LGBTQ community. Even though I had noticed it, I'd never thought much of it. But this was kind of catalyst for me to actually start researching more on political movements, left versus right, what's happening in India, what's happening in the world. Till then, I was still struggling with, just being accepted as myself. So I hadn't really done too much research. But after this incident, I started doing more and more research. And that's when I realized that the whole LGBTQ movement in the US, and unfortunately now to a large extent in India, has been kind of overtaken by the ultra-leftist political movement. And so everything that they kind of stand for is they basically stand for anything that's anti-government, anti-current government in India. And so that's how this whole kind of cabal of in seemingly unrelated identities kind of got meshed up together. So at that point I had to make a choice. Like, do I stay true to, I was always a practicing Hindu. I've always been a practicing Hindu. And I was never apologetic or, ashamed of it. I was quite a proud Indian. I knew that India had issues, but I was quite proud of how we've kind of overcome, or at least trying to overcome, our colonial mindset and heading towards more of, self-rule in the last few years and all of that. So I was always very connected to my roots. And so it felt like, again, I was at crossroads where, in order to be accepted by this community of mine in the US, I had to be apologetic, or at least give up my Hindu roots or Indian roots. So I had to take a decision on where I would have to, which side I had to take. And I realized that, like, I'm still, you cannot take the India or the Indian away from me, or the Hindu away from me, even if I move out of the country. And so I had to make a call there.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I've mentioned in the book as well.
Okay, so that's very interesting, Deepthi. So now I understood what you meant by saying you had two bad options. Either you have to choose the community, or you need to choose your country and religion and all of that. But I thought LGBTQ community in essence stood for liberalism, like opening up people's minds to different ways of life and different identities, right? So I thought this whole community was to form that safe net where it's okay to have diverse identities, diverse opinions. So let's accept everyone the way they are. And it's such a paradoxical thing for the same community to cancel you out just because of your opinions on something. So that now I don't know if I have to box them as being orthodox in one aspect. And so they literally tell you where you need to be liberal and where you need to fit into their ideas and thoughts.
Right. Yeah, that's very well said, actually. And I think Rajiv ji also had mentioned in one of his videos, it's almost like the Church of Wokeism or Church of Liberalism.
Yeah.
So liberalism itself has become so dogmatic that they've essentially taken the core meaning of liberalism. It's ironic that they call themselves liberal when they're not open to diversity of ideas. So when they say diversity, it's almost like a token word being used to, for superficial aspects of diversity, like your color or your race, or maybe now your sexual identity. But there is no diversity of thought, or there's no tolerance or acceptance for diversity of thought. And that is where I think it's become pretty ironic.
That's just very sad to learn something like a community, which is like a mascot for liberalism and things like that, is so orthodox. And for outsiders like us, this is very eye-opening. And to hear it from an insider who's seen the in and out of it, because they paint a very rosy picture on the outside. Like for us, we just feel like, oh, wow, there are these great movements happening in the US. It's so nice that they're accepting of all identities and all of that, but we don't really know what's going on the inside. So I think as an insider, to give that perspective, and I've never heard about someone talk about this before as well. I don't know why. I think they're like a close-knit group. They just expel anyone who don't sit with their ideas, I think.
Right. And I do need to add, though, I don't think this is the case across the US. This was my experience with the the LGBTQ community in the Bay Area in California. However, like I've been in Texas, and the group there is very, very, very accepting of multiple, thoughts, religions, practices. So I think it's also something that's more focused on the coast, like the East Coast and the West Coast. Like if you're in New York, or say you're in California, Seattle, those are the states where you see these extreme views. There's more polarization in terms of left versus right, versus in some of the other groups where it's less politicized and is more focused on creating a safe space for the people of the LGBTQ community. So there do exist such groups, and that's what I keep saying, that we have to be mindful of not letting political ideas kind of overtake. Let's not forget the core purpose of the group, which is to provide a safe space, provide community for people that probably are not accepted elsewhere, right? And that should be the primary goal. And then diversity in all its forms should be accepted and celebrated as well.
Exactly. Like, for instance, CAA or something like that has got nothing to do with the community. If it was a bill that dealt with the community, at least we understand it's completely political.
Perfectly
and
true.
We saw that in India as well. I mean, these pockets of LGBTQ community, they just came out in defense, and it was just an accepted norm that they would definitely refute the bill. So there was no way that they would. So that was very surprising for us to see.
Yeah. Actually, after all this happened, like my trigger for doing more research is where I have understood kind of how this unusual alliance might have happened. So if you take the US as kind of the base, that's where most of the LGBTQ movement started as well. So the majority of people or the right wing was kind of controlled by the church, which was always against gay people. It was because it's not accepted in the Bible. It's a sin in the Bible to be gay. So the left that was created was basically a political structure that was to kind of stand up against the current power, which is the right. And so anything that was non-Christian or anything that Christians kind of opposed were clumped into the left bracket. So LGBTQ by default found that allyship with the left because, of course, the Christian church, the Catholic Church didn't allow it. And so it felt like it was a natural alliance. The same thing happened with women because, again, church wasn't very pro-women. And that's how women's movement also kind of got absorbed into the leftist political group. In the same bucket, it also happened that Islam also was, because the church and Islam were always at loggerheads with each other. So the leftist movement kind of absorbed minorities, and Islam became kind of a part of the pro-leftist group. However, it's funny that you have LGBTQ and Islam kind of supported by the same larger political bracket, because again, it's not allowed to be gay in Islam, right? Like it's haram to be gay in Islam as well. So, and so this has been kind of a little bit of history on how the leftist movement kind of included LGBTQ, and it did provide it a lot of benefits too, right? Like gay people, otherwise on their own, they were fighting for so long, like starting from the Stonewall riots, till they found a stronger political alliance with the left. It was more of a struggle of, the small minority people. But once it became a political movement and the Democrats and the left actually took it up as a cause, that's when it found political respect as well. Like if you see positions taken by Obama or any of the other, like even Bill Clinton, they were all like either anti-gay or undecided. And then once the group got stronger and it got more political mileage within the Democrats, they took it up as an issue. And that's how eventually in 2015, we were able to get, equality of marriage in the US. Right. So that is how I think the there is this alliance of, seemingly contradictory philosophies that are kind of clubbed by the left. And unfortunately, somehow there has been this, even though most Indians and Hindus in the US are Democrats, they are actually pro-Democratic Party. Democratic Party has always been anti-Hindu, maybe because the Islam alliance within the Democrats has been stronger, and they've always kind of funded. If you look at the current caste issues that are going on in the US as well, all of that is funded by the care groups and equality labs, which are very Hinduphobic or anti-Hindu as well. So unfortunately, the same thing has moved to India. And that's why we find that LGBTQ groups in India are ultra-leftist, even though Hinduism is probably the only religion that has never opposed or condemned homosexuality. If you look at the Bible or the Quran, there are explicit mentions of it being a sin to be gay. Right? And there's exactly, there's even the Mughal Empire had specific rules of how many times you need to get flogged if you were gay, based on whether you were Muslim or an infidel or a slave. So versus Hinduism has always celebrated, if you look at the Vedas, even Rig Veda has mention of, homosexual couples. The Kama Sutra has mentions of it. There have been numerous instances of, intersex, transgender. We have the third sex. We are the first religion to actually mention and actually revere the third sex as well. So Hinduism is actually the only religion, if I may say, that has actually included homosexuality and transgender people as a part of its own, Maya, the diverse Maya that we have.
Yes. They've always celebrated diversity and differences, and there has never been these sanctions that one has to be this way or one has to conform to a certain set of rules. So, but I think that was very well put across, this alliance of how the left and Islam come together. This sort of gives this clarity, because until now, it just seemed like, how can these Abrahamic religions having such radical views on homosexuality collide with the left and form this alliance and single out an enemy in Hinduism?
Exactly.
So that was very, I just don't know how that works, but it works very well.
Yeah, I think it can work only if you're, to a certain extent, you need to have some amount of hypocrisy, right? If you are objectively looking at it, and if you were very honest with yourself, you'll be the first one to call this out, saying, hey, there does seem like there's some cognitive dissonance amongst the groups that we are. While I 100% support anybody, every religion, and everybody needs to have the right to practice their religion, you need to critically examine what your religion says about this, and then maybe have reforms in that too. There have been so many things that we have called for in our religion or in our societal practices in Hinduism that need to be reformed. Similarly, there needs to be that critical examination within the religion, instead of shutting people off when they bring it up as well. And it's funny, I think yesterday's newspaper also, I saw that the Quran, I saw that the minority religions had all grouped and written a letter to the Supreme Court saying marriage equality for LGBTQ is against our religion, it's against Quran, so we do not support this. So there has been open opposition from the groups, versus for a few weeks ago, RSS came out in support of LGBTQ community. They said that it's always existed in our society, it's always been accepted, so we should definitely make sure that they're accepted and integrated. So that there is that contrast. However, if you look at the conversations that happen within the LGBTQ groups, they're always looking at any statements, even pro-LGBTQ statements made by RSS or the Indian government. They're always viewed with suspicion, and discussions about, say the Quran saying no to same-sex marriage, that's never even brought up, or it's ignored. So we need to be aware and call out when you say equality, it needs to be equal for everyone in the true spirit of equality.
Absolutely. So, Deepthi, do you think this whole woke movement of equity over equality is sustainable? Like, do you think, as part of the community, is that what you want, where you're just looking for equity instead of equal opportunities? So, what do you think of this whole movement of just demanding a position just because you belong to a certain community? Like, do you see that as equality, or it's just victimhood?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. If you look at kind of the historic roots, right, you can trace it back to the critical theory that was proposed, that became famous, popularized in like the 90s, and it's gained a lot of momentum in the last few years. So essentially what it says is that, so critical theory is basically, it was a theory that was created to kind of dissolve the current power structures and establish new structures, right? So it's essentially not a theory of equality. It is a theory that enables power grab from one set of people that have power to another set. That is what it essentially is, but in the guise of equality, in guise of diversity. So that's kind of the kosher way of saying it. But their demands don't end there, right? Like it's essentially the theory kind of proposes that we need to dismantle whatever current power structures exist, and because they are oppressive. So there's always this oppressor and oppressed structure that's created, and then whoever is in power is currently the oppressor, and they are in power because of decades of oppression, and hence it gives the current oppressed or like historically oppressed the right to kind of take over. So with that context, if you look at equality versus equity, so equality means we want every person to be given equal opportunity to compete, and that definitely needs to happen, right? Like there are still areas where people are not given equal representation in terms of opportunities, and that definitely we need to focus there and provide, and that doesn't need to be based on specific identity. It could be that, yes, Dalits definitely need more focus. We need to support wherever they have not been given equal opportunity, but there are also other groups that might also be lacking opportunity, maybe because of economic factors or any other reason as well. So we need to look at it as a whole and provide equal opportunities to everyone. However, equity is where it kind of again turns the whole concept on its head. So instead of providing equal opportunities to everyone, equity actually wants equal outcomes, which is where I think this whole critical theory of creating new power structures, this is those are the roots where the equity concept has come from. So instead of saying that everybody needs to write the same exam and everyone's given an equal opportunity to compete, it's almost like saying that everybody needs to because say this person didn't have the ability to study whatever. Even if they get 40%, we're going to call it 90%, or we are going to give them an easier paper for them to score 100. So that is where I think it kind of if you look at it in the long run, we are going to create a society where true meritocracy and celebration of intelligence, celebration of hard work, all of that might get diluted, and people will start assuming various victim mentalities just to make things easier for themselves and start getting. So I definitely am for providing equal opportunity, but we need to critically examine whether equity is really the way to go. It might not be the real social benefit theory that it claims to be. So we need to critically examine how it will affect societies in the long run. So the same people that propose equity, equal outcomes instead of equality, I think if they had to have a heart operation, I don't think they're going to go and say, I want to provide equal opportunity, so get me a Dalit doctor, right? At that point, they will probably want the best surgeon, whoever it is, regardless of their caste or color or race. And that is where meritocracy matters. So when it comes to life and death, you're not going to consider all these factors. So we need to keep that in mind. And if this is what continues, then we are going to be at a society where you have people in critical, important life and death professions that are there when they probably don't have the merit to be there too. So we need to really examine how this will affect our society and not get carried away by all these seemingly well-meaning sounding words as well.
Oh, that was very well put, Deepthi. That was very well put. Yeah, I think we'll just be encouraging mediocrity and there'll be loss of merit in the society, and we ourselves will suffer, especially when it comes to situations like life and death, when each one of us shed all our identities and want to just live. And and that's when it'll really face the heat of it. So also, Deepthi, what do you think of this whole queer movement that has gained momentum lately? It seeks to reject all categories of gender, and to just achieve that equality.
Yeah, it's again a very, very interesting theory. So if you look at the history of the LGBTQ movement, right, it was formed because gay, lesbians, or transgender people were not accepted by the society. We've kind of marginalized. Actively hate. There were a lot of hate crimes in the US and other countries that used to happen. So there was a real need for them to kind of unite and demand for equal rights and not just equal rights, but also kind of integration and normalization in the society. So the queer movement actually started in the late 90s. So it was a theory that was proposed by some liberal arts it was by some professors that kind of studied about social sciences and all these gender studies and all that. So the theory essentially says that gender and sex are different. Like you might be biologically born as a certain sex, but your gender is performative. It's you might be born a woman biologically or a man, but the characteristics that you exhibit as you grow up, they are all social structures. Like you probably take cues from society that as a woman, this is how I should behave, and then you start behaving that way. So they essentially want to dissolve all concepts of male and female and say that everyone's free to choose their gender or, call themselves whatever gender they please. I have mixed views about this. So if you look at LGBTQ movement, it was formed out of a real need for, equality, versus queer theory almost feels like a hammer in search of a nail. So there is no real problem that it's trying to address. Originally, maybe the transgender, it did seem like it kind of supported the trans movement in some ways, which I totally respect, right? Like there are people that really feel like they are born in the wrong body, and definitely we support them, and we are all part of the LGBTQ group, and we support that. However, the queer theory almost kind of confuses people, especially when it's taught to, younger generations, like kids that are still not very sure of what they are or what the world is. Being told that you might be born a boy, but are you really a boy? Do you really think? All of that kind of confuses, and it almost seems like, again, it has its roots in critical theory as well. So it does seem like it's, again, trying to dissolve current structures and create new structures in future. So I'm a little bit confused about where it's going, honestly. And we need to see like how this plays out. It does kind of create a lot of confusion, and it almost sometimes it almost dilutes the real issues that LGBTQ people are facing, because like there are real trans issues that we need to address, versus the whole queer movement of, saying that, I don't know, maybe today I don't believe in gender. It feels very like it's very, I don't know if there is a real problem that we're trying to solve with the whole queer movement. I'm still learning. This has been my confusion, or kind of my struggle with it as well. But if you look at the queer theory, Judith Butler and few of them that kind of brought it into the mainstream, it all stems from critical theory again. So I'm a little bit skeptical about whether it's really there to solve a problem, or is it there again to dissolve current structures and create new power structures? In which case, I think we should view it with a little bit of skepticism as well.
Right. And also, as I see, these theories are like they're laying the foundations and ground for all these sex change surgeries and all of that. Like kids who are brainwashed into these surgeries, they're opting for these irreversible, life-altering surgeries. They're not able to make sane decisions because they're just being brainwashed by this agenda. And maybe they're just a little confused, like a girl, okay, I might be a boy, so let me just go and opt for the surgery. And later she might regret it. Maybe it was just a passing phase in her life. As a kid, kids are distracted. There are all sorts of things around them, and they tend to believe everything before they're able to make informed decisions for themselves. So I think there are these very devastating effects because of these theories, and I think that's their agenda, to get as many people to get into these kind of procedures.
Yeah, we need to question, if you're not old enough to drive, if you're not old enough to drink, I don't think you're old enough to decide whether you want to have a sex change, or whether you want to make decisions that affect you and your body in the long term, right? So maybe give it time till things mature. I know that I had so many views when I was in my early 20s that I don't hold on to anymore. So people evolve, and we should be cautious about making decisions that might affect us, that we don't, it's not like people don't even encourage kids to have tattoos, because later on you might grow up to regret it, right? And removing a tattoo is harder. Imagine making that a permanent change to your body that might really change the course of your life in future. So I don't want to dilute or negate the fact that there are genuinely people that are very passionate about wanting to be of a different gender. We should definitely examine each of that and support them accordingly, but we should also be cautious about adding to people that might not have thought about this at all. If it hadn't been for queer theory becoming mainstream and adding to the confusion to kids' minds, so in such cases we should definitely exercise caution and restraint, and make sure that it's a well thought out decision as well.
Right, that's great, Deepthi, and I think it was an eye-opening conversation on many aspects. So thank you for sharing all those that information with us. And just for our viewers, I want to tell a little bit about you. I want to add a few things about you. So Deepthi identifies as a Hindu lesbian and is very connected to her Dharmic roots. She interest in understanding how Dharmic concepts could be applied to current times to build a more equitable and peaceful society. That's amazing, Deepthi. Do you want to add something more? I heard that you also have a community and you have a Facebook page for that.
Yeah. So in my previous talk with Rajiv Ji, once it went live, I got a lot of requests from people that wanted to, be a part of that identified as LGBTQ, but couldn't come out because they saw that the LGBTQ movement was probably anti-Hindu and they weren't very comfortable with that. So I wanted to start a new community where we could all be accepted and we wouldn't be anti-Hindu for sure. And where we could actually be inclusive of everyone that's from the LGBTQIA+, while not being overtaken by political agendas. So it's called Indradhanush. And I just started the group yesterday, and I would love for people to join that. So we'll put a link to the group in our YouTube video as well. So please do join, and let's all try to create a new conversation around the LGBTQ movement as well.
That's a wonderful initiative. Thank you, Deepthi.
Thank you. Thank you, Divya. This was lovely. It was very insightful for me as well. Like while we were, all the questions that you were bringing up, it really sparked a lot of interesting conversations. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.